I am Ryan Hansen, Brülosophy contributor, and today I get the pleasure of walking you through building a recipe in Brewfather. And before we jump into a recipe, we're also going to set up a simple brewery profile so that all of the calculations will happen on their own. Let's get to it. All right, friends, we went through the basics of Brewfather and kind of an overview in the last video, and today we're going to jump right into the actual steps that it takes to using this software. This is software that I use weekly to make my recipes, to scale recipes for new systems that I'm trying out, and it's an absolutely powerful piece of software like we discussed last time. So today I'm going to start by walking you through the profiles right here. And so specifically, we're going to look at the equipment profile. So this top line right here, the importance of this cannot be understated, friends. Without the system knowing what system you're brewing on, it can't do the calculations correctly. And so we're talking initial water volume, what salts you're going to add if you're building up from RO or adjusting your water profiles. It needs to know your boil off rates so that it can predict your gravities, mash efficiency, and all of that stuff comes right out of this equipment profile. So I'm going to give you a high level view of how to set that up and customize it for your setup. Fortunately, Brewfather makes this super, super easy for you because almost all of the commercial systems that you can find already have profiles built into them. So you might just need to adjust some stuff. So I'm going to pick the exact system that I use. I'm going to walk you through the steps that I do to make this work for my brewery. I do want to point out that the systems will change just a little bit in efficiency based on outside factors, kind of say water profile or the grain crush, how fine or thick it is. New ingredients might behave a little bit different, but in general, I found that the calculations for this software are spot on and repeatable, which is key. So in here, I'm in equipment selection, and we can see right here, here's some that are custom that I've made, but for the most part, these are all built right in. And so I use the Clawhammer Supply Brew in a Basket. This is one that I built. This is the default one that came with the system. And so I'm just going to click on this one and pretend like I'm setting it up for myself the first time I use it. But as you can see, we've got Grain Fathers, we've got what are other ones? Oh, the Pico Brews even in here, SS BrüTech. There's a ton of things in here for you to choose from. So I'm going to go with the Clawhammer Supply because that is what I use. So it's going to default to a lot of basic things that you will not need to change. And so let's just start at the top and kind of go down the list. Obviously, there's the name. Here's a description. Here's a boil time, a 60-minute boil. If you're doing short and shotties only, change that to 30 minutes or whatever time you're doing your boil. That's going to affect the boil off rate throughout your brew day. I want my target batch size to be 5.5 gallons because that's going to account for that true loss before it goes into the keg, right? And so whatever your target volume is, if you're doing 2-gallon batches, 3-gallon batches, I set mine to 5.5. And so we just do that right there. And that's going to adjust all the other stuff, how much starting water, absorption rates, and all of those are going to calculate, aiming for at the end of my brew day, I've got 5.5 gallons going into my fermenter. So the other option here is kettle, which means that's before you transfer to the fermenter. Do you, if that's how you like to do those calculations. Calculating your boil volume, obviously that's important. So leave that checked. A boil off rate. This one's kind of important. 120 volt system is not going to boil as vigorously as a 240 system, for example. So one easy way to do this, and most brewers do it the first time they use their system, is to fill it with water, get it up to a boil, and note how much starting volume you have. And then once that hour of boil is over, look at how much is left. That's your boil off volume. There's other ways of doing that, and wort is going to be a better way to calculate that than just water by itself, but it's a great place to start. So, and I'll point this out for this one, but this goes for all of these variables. If you notice that your boil off rate is not accurate. So at the end of a boil, you've got way less or way more wort. Go into the profile and adjust it. So that's how you're going to fine tune this software. That goes for all the other variables in here as well. So let's keep moving. Trub and chiller loss. This is what's left at the bottom of the kettle before you transfer to the fermenter. Pretty straightforward. Almost all of these are going to default to 0 right here. Mash tun dead space, mash tun loss. This would be if you have a false bottom and there's some wort that doesn't transfer into your boil kettle. That's where that is marked. So for what I'm doing, those are all 0. I have very little trub loss. That's usually just marked 0.02 because I'm going to make a mess sometime during the brew day, maybe boil overs or something like that. And so that's what, well, I guess not boil over. But the chiller loss. Fermenter loss. So here's what's going to be left at the bottom of the fermenter. You can go up and down based on your experience to dial that in. The numbers that you plugged in up here are what dictate your brew house efficiency. The clawhammer supply, that's perfectly accurate based on my experience. 67, 68% is what I get, especially that's going to matter if I am doing short and shoddy brew days. Maybe that'll be closer to like 62 or 63. I know in my head I got to compensate for that, and so I don't mess with that. This here mash efficiency is all of your efficiency before the boil. So this is everything, including sparge. If you're sparging, that's what your mash efficiency is. Again, you're going to read your gravity readings and kind of dial this in over time. Let's keep moving. The hop utilization multiplier, leave that at 100 at the homebrew scale. If I'm scaling recipes to do professional brewing, I bump that up to 110%, maybe 115, depending on the system that we're using. Commercial systems just have higher hop utilization efficiency, and so that's where that goes in. That dictates what your IBUs are and how that calculation is made. The hop stand temperature, I would bump this up to 180 just for myself. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So 180, that's what temperature I try to target for a hop stand. But again, do you, and that is going to change the aroma hop utilization based on that temperature. So very important numbers to keep track of. High altitude. If you're a high altitude brewer, you probably know that your boil temperature isn't 212. Adjust accordingly just to make sure that it's tracking that. Grain absorption rate. This seems a little, the water to grain ratio, 1.25 quarts per pound. That's what I had in my mind. That's how it's going to calculate how much starting water you have. When we build our recipe, I'll show you exactly where that is. It's pretty important, and you can go from there. That's pretty accurate. There's different ratios for brew in a bag versus sparge, for example. You can just play with that and figure out what it is for your system. So no sparge is the system that I use. It's a brew in a basket. The other options here are batch sparge, and you can ignore boil expansion. I'm not sure why anybody would do that, or set it to custom, but we're set with no sparge on mine. Because again, you lift that basket out. Same thing with a brew in a bag. You can lift that out and just squeeze it and get all that out. And so that's kind of where that grain absorption calculation is going to change if you're not brew in a bag. Overflow target. This is if you are topping up a boil and you're telling your system, if it's not big enough for a full volume of water, you're telling the system, hey, I can only have, say, 6 gallons, including the grains in my kettle. It's going to wait until after you've removed the grains to have you add the rest of your water. So that's what that means, is that top up for your boil, because you can fit the full 6 gallons for your boil, but you can't do grains and water full volume. So again, when we're building our recipe, I'll show you where that comes into play. It's pretty straightforward once you see it. That's your hot liquor tank if you've got one. Calculating your strike water temperature. So room temperature, grains at 68. If you want to mash in at 152, you know that there's going to be a drop in temperature. That's where it's going to help you. With electric systems like the all-in-ones, that's really not a thing. You just set that temperature that you want. Within a couple of minutes, it's back up to the temperature where you want it. So I never worry about that, even though that is checked. So I could really undo that. So that is about it on a basic brew in a basket system. There are a couple of nuances and tweaks, but for that, I would highly recommend you go straight to the Brewfather's page, and it's docs.brewfather.app, and we'll put that link down below. And it's a step-by-step, every single feature. It's going to tell you exactly what is what in here, and you can use their native resources to really go at it. So setting up your equipment profile, and there's a little walkthrough down here that's like, if you do this kind of brewing, these are the steps that you want to take. So basic steps to set up a profile for a single vessel system. Straightforward. All right, bouncing back over here. So I'm just going to hit save. Oh, yeah. And when you're in there, when you're in your profile, if you check this star up here, that's what your system is going to default to. So whenever you go in to make a new recipe, defaults to this profile. If you have multiple systems, you can input a recipe and it'll scale it based on which equipment profile you pick. Hopefully that all makes sense. Let's jump into the fun stuff. So now I'm going to put in a Brülosophy Vienna Lager recipe into Brewfather. And so we're going to start pretending like I've never seen this recipe before, and we're going to do it. And so recipes right here at the very top, you go to this plus sign, add recipe, and that opens up your recipe builder. I'm even going to get into water profiles on this one, so pay attention. This is fun. So right now, let's see what equipment it's picked. Equipment, Biab, no sparge, but this is showing this 10.5 gallon. That's because it's defaulting to my 10-gallon brewing claw hammer supply. So we're going to change it right here. So you go to this swap button right there, and I can go in. See, that's what's set up for my default. We're going to go to a 5-gallon system. And so we're going to pick the claw hammer supply, brew in a bag, and hit save. So as you see, all the same numbers that we used before. I'm targeting a 5.5 gallon final into the fermenter. So we're all set there, and hit save. And so all of the IBU calculations, the color, so the SRM, the water, all of those things are going to calculate for that 5.5. We're just going to say Brülosophy Vienna Lager. Love this style, by the way. Author, this is Brülosophy. I can't take credit for it because I did not write it. I found it on the Brülosophy website where you should go. And we're going to just get right into it. So right now it's showing final gravity is 1, which is what? Water. That's right. And everything else is zeros because there's no IBUs, there's no SRM, there's nothing else like that. You're going to watch these numbers change as we go. And you'll notice that the beer color is white. It's because we don't have anything to change the color yet. And so just keep an eye on those as we go. The first ingredient here is a Venora. So we're going to put Venora, and it automatically pulls it up. Here's Mecca Grade Estate Malts. This is a fantastic maltster that we've been using, and I love it. And so we're going to put, sorry, I'm looking down at the paper recipe so that I can follow along. We're going to put 12.25 pounds. This already has the grain, the color, the Lovabond color. It has the potential. So this is the diastatic or the conversion potential and the yield. And so that's about all I'm going to do for this one. Now you can do two things. You can say save, and that closes that. Or when you're in there, you can hit the plus button. It saves it to the recipe and it lets you search for the next one. We're going to do pale chocolate. Right here, chocolate malt pale. I like that, 222 Lovabond, that's about right. And we're going to change the amount to just 2 ounces. So 0 and 2 right there. So that's going to give it a nice, pretty little color bump. Not much flavor change from just 1% there. Okay, so take a look here. We've got ABV. It's already estimating 5.5%. And so we can see more specific numbers throughout the software. So it's going to tell us our pre-boil gravity, our original gravity. So that's after your boil. 1056 is one of my favorite OGs, just so that you know. And then down here, we have some other specs that we're going to get into in a second. So that's all there is for the malts. We're going to hop over here to hops. We're going to add Tettnang. And this particular one, we're going to pick US. This is important, folks. Your hops specifically are going to come with their alpha acids from that particular crop listed. So this one defaulted to 4.5, but this recipe calls for 3.5. So that's whatever hop the author of this recipe calculated. And so you're calculating IBUs. If you are targeting a certain IBU and you want that to be consistent batch over batch, it's really important that you keep track of that alpha acid number. So we're just going to save it. Oh, I guess it's important that I tell it how much. So this one is in grams. So we have 3.5% alpha acid, which is what the author's hops were coming in at, which changes from the default on there. So pay attention to that. And this says 28 grams, which is 1 ounce at 20 minutes. So this is, for the time, this is at first wort. So first wort is when you are just transferring over from the mash tun into the fermenter. And so we're going to mark first wort right there. This recipe has a weird time on there, but that's what it's going to be in. So 1 ounce, the first ounce goes in at first wort. So right as you're transferring from the fermenter into the boil kettle, usually I've got my boil kettle coming up to a boil while that transfer is happening if I'm using separate vessels. This is once I pull the basket out of my brew kettle and I'm letting that water drain out, I would sneak in the hops underneath it so that it can start imparting flavor on that. And so the next one that we're going to add, so we save it. The next one that we add, and here you see the IBUs popped up to 13. That is exactly what we wanted. So we're going to add Magnum next. See, it's tracking how much I have in inventory over here. And we are going to add half an ounce, 0.5. And this is also going in at first wort. Pretty straightforward. We watched our IBU go up. Magnum has a higher alpha acid. This particular one is 12.9. So that's why our IBUs jumped up so much from 13 to 36, which is great to see because that's exactly what it's supposed to do. And then we are going to add our last one, which is another charge of Tettnang. And we're going to do US again, minding this, 3.5. And again, we're doing 1 ounce, but this time they are boil hops, and we're going to put them in at the end of the boil. So most of the hops were added at first wort, which is fine. And then we just have 10-minute of aroma hops there at the end. So we're going to save that. That is all of our hop additions. We are now going to jump into the yeast. So this is important. We at Brülosophy love Imperial, and so I'm going to add Harvest right there. 1 package. This you can put in the manufacturing date, and it will give a pretty good estimate, as long as it's been stored properly in the refrigerator the whole time, of how much hop drop off there would, how many yeast cells will have dropped off and died over that storage time. So if I put in that it is a 1.5 years old, it's going to say, hey, you're probably going to need more of this because the yeast count is going to be too low. What I like about this is I can play around with this, and I see the attenuation over here. It's maximum ABV. The software just has all of that in there, which is super helpful because sometimes I'm curious, like, hey, can this handle a 12%, double IPA or whatever? And so it's telling me that. And so that's either adding more yeast nutrients, more yeast itself, and all of those things, or pick a different yeast for something that's out of the boundaries. So it tells me it's a lager and it's liquid, all useful information. So we're going to save that. One thing that we didn't talk about, I can bounce back out of there, but in the profiles, you can change your mash profiles. And so I'm just going to show you in here. For example, these are ones that I have. Mine is just default to medium fermentability. So 152 degrees is just a good start point for most things. But if I want high fermentability, this is where you mark that. And so we're just going to leave it at medium and save that. Miscellaneous, this is where you would add carrageenan, the biofine. This is where you would add other adjuncts that wouldn't be on fermentables. So that's where you would put that. It'll affect these numbers if it's applicable, or otherwise it's just your reminder to add those when. Talk about mash profile, fermentation profile. This is also something that you can customize. So you got Kvik, 91.4 lager. Here's our lager ranges, lager standard. We are actually going to change that to lager standard. And I will ferment this at 55 degrees and ramp it up to 65 at the end. Blasphemy, I know, but guess what? It works, so get over it. And we're going to save that. And so now it's going to remind me these are the temperatures that we're going to use. And so it builds that in. I'll fine tune that later for myself. But I really want to get into this. This is the most important part of a lager, in my opinion, is the water. So, okay, now we are looking at the water profile. In my opinion, a perfect lager has to start with perfect water. And so I'm going to show you my process, and hopefully this is extremely helpful for you guys. First and foremost, the software has already calculated how much water we need. So before I even go out into my brew day to gather my water, there's no guessing involved. This tells me 8.59 gallons of mash volume. That's water plus grains. And so to get the proper amount for 5.5 gallons into my fermenter, I need to start with right here, total water, 7.59 gallons of total water. If you have a system that can't handle that total water and the grains at the same time, you can break it out, and in your mash profile, like I already showed you, this is where it's going to tell you start with 4 gallons, mash in. Once you mash out, add the rest of the sparge water, and then you're going to get to that total volume pre-boil, and you are good to go. But because mine is brew in a basket, I can handle all of the volume of water and grains in the same time. So single infusion mash is what that's called. We're going to get into this water real quick, and I'm going to show you exactly what I do. So water source. Let's start here. This is important. So your water source, here's all different ones that I've made, different breweries, different places. You need to put this in. And so you can add your profile if you have your water report from your local city, or you send it into Ward Labs, or you've got a water tester, or you're starting from RO. You start your own. And so this would be Big Pop's water profile, and I would put in the results from that survey. How much calcium is in there? How much magnesium, sodium, chloride, sulfate, and bicarbonate, all of those numbers, so that I'm going to X out of this, so that when you jump in and you tell it your target profile right here, it can calculate what salts you want. Isn't that easy? So I'm going to pick, let's see. I could go with American lager. No, because it's, this is a Vienna lager. And so let's just look at the different options that we have. I'm probably going to pick this basic lager right here, but as you see, there's a bunch of different profiles that you can pick from, and that is set as the target, so that when you hit save, now the software knows this is what I'm starting with. So in my case, reverse osmosis. And the target profile, if I hit this button right here, this is the magic button, that's why there's a magic wand on there, auto, bink. It tells me exactly what I need to add for my water profile to be absolutely perfect. It gives me the mash pH. I am going to add 0.6 grams of gypsum, tiny amount of calcium chloride, and Epsom salt. I generally do not add the other three that are here, but you can certainly do that. In my opinion, these three are where you make the best bang for your buck. So this is where a little jeweler's scale and a shot glass, and you're going to have, for this, for example, it's going to look like a teeny tiny amount at the bottom of a shot glass. It's almost nothing for this 7 gallons of starting water. That is how you do it. And so there's other options in here, but I don't want to confuse anybody or get out over our skis with malt acidification or sparge acidification additions or anything like that. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Come in, pick your source, make your profile if you don't have one, choose your source water, choose your target profile, hit auto. And once that's done, you save adjustments to recipe. It's going to add those right here in the miscellaneous column, and you are good to go. Again, calcium chloride, Epsom salt, and gypsum are the three that I recommend using. So that is our recipe, folks. This is a complete recipe. And for reference, when I go out to brew day, I will hit print. And I can then print it and it is good to go. I can share it with somebody. I can export it as a file so somebody else can grab that and put it directly into their Brewfather. If I want to tweak this, I hit duplicate up here. And it's pretty straightforward. This is what it's going to print like. So you've got your title up top. It's all style grain, your profile, mash water. So this is how much RO I need to collect the night before, 7.6 gallons. Here's the stats that it's calculating for you, your original gravity, final gravity, because it knows what yeast we're going to use, what IBUs it's going to be, what color it's going to be. And it just goes right down the list. And now you have a complete recipe, including your salt additions. This is going to be a fantastic beer, and I trust my system profile enough to know that we are going to be really close. So friends, that is it on how to build an equipment profile and how to build a simple recipe in Brewfather. I hope that was useful for you. As always, send us your questions, put it in the comments down below, and we'll make sure and get you whatever information you need. Highly recommend getting started on Brewfather today.